The title of the Dharma talk today is Blame and Forgiveness. They're topics that I've talked about before, and I'm very opinionated about them. So you'll soon find out. Darned opinions. So blame is something that we do. It's just about impossible to just stop it because it's so, as has been said, such a knee-jerk or just an immediate response to something happens, and we immediately have a feeling, and then we point. It's not even. The pointing has already happened by the time we start to think and back it up with thoughts, or remove it with thoughts, or manipulate it with thoughts. I shouldn't have said. I shouldn't do that. I should. Oh, there I go again. Or it's just an endless stream of commentary. So the basic understanding that I would like to convey is that of which you've heard me say many times: don't do anything with it. Don't try to stop the blame. Don't support the blame or add to it or fuel it or back it up or justify it. Blame seems to have, sometimes blame has no story. It just, we just know that we're trying to find something. And if we look outside and try to find it, then we'll perhaps try to look inside and see if maybe we can blame ourselves for it. Sometimes this happens without any work at all. We just immediately know we're at fault. There I go again. Done it again. And then there's a blame with the story. And the blame with the story is some kind of a backup to justify and say, well, this, and which is going to make sense to those people who like to make sense, or those people who like the relative truth. And then there's other people who don't really care about truth. They just want to advance their position. So it could be based in an actual fact that's verifiable on some level, or it could be based on some kind of a fiction that you've reinforced in such a way that looks like fact, feels like fact. Quite often this is what opinions are. Our society, our culture, I don't know about other cultures, but ours tends to validate. If you have an opinion, it's your opinion. They say you're entitled to your opinion. No, you're not. That's a lie. Or is that the truth? What do you think? What do you think about what I'm thinking?
What are you thinking?
Isn't it obvious? I just told you. I'm the one that's been talking for 10 minutes.
I thought so.
There you go, thinking again. The so part was extra. I thought was accurate. When you said so, you actually abandoned your thought for something else. An empty pole in the middle of a field.
I don't remember saying so. Did I say so?
Yeah, you said I thought so.
Oh.
So the whole idea of blame, I don't misunderstand me. I'm not trying to say to stop that. I'm saying it's only about being aware of it. If you're aware that you're blaming, or where you're blaming out here, you're aware that you're blaming yourself for something that, say, you did this and you did this, and say, well, it's my fault. I shouldn't have done that, or shouldn't have said that. And it's not that there isn't some kind of correctness or accuracy or something that you can validate. Of course there is. There always is something like that most of the time. But what's being said is by doing that and attaching to that and reifying that through your structure, you're basically buying into and solidifying a relative situation that is passable. It's passable. But it's not fundamentally what's going on. Fundamentally, what is going on? Can I hear it? Can I hear an amen? Not separate. See if you can realize this. If you realize not separate, you'll never point at anything again. It's just a way of understanding that is so complete, so fundamental. And this is why Kobanshino, when he translates the mantra in the Heart Sutra of gone, gone, gone beyond, gone completely beyond, awake, so be it. He translates it as falling apart, falling apart, falling apart, nothing to do. I think that's more accurate, because it actually talks about a very mundane situation where your idea, your personality, your self-centeredness, you're grasping at a self, you're rejecting another, you're grasping at another, you're rejecting a self, the constant warfare that's happening everywhere. It's all over the world. Comes apart. And when it comes apart, it both is there and not there. Again, not two. This is not a peace sign. This is what it looks like, and this is how it is. This is how it looks. This is how it is. That was pretty cool, wasn't it? So, visual aids. I have to cover my lapel mic so I don't blow somebody's eardrums out. So we can talk more about the whole idea of blaming or blaming. And so again, it's not about stop. If you go in to try to stop from doing that, you're missing the point that I'm trying to make. So what is the point I'm trying to make? Aware. If you're aware, then the way you or anyone in here or anyone outside of here will work with this will be very, very unique and individual, and will be respectful of all the causes and conditions that are unseen that are coming together to perform any given so-called isolated situation. The Buddha's the words out of the Buddha's mouth is everything is dependently arisen. You can't find a single cause and effect. All dharmas are without blame. This doesn't mean that there isn't some kind of structure going on where this pushes on that causes that to happen. Yes. We're not trying to get rid of it. We're just saying if you can see its totality, then you will not go to war anymore. You will also not make any more decisions based on partial evidence. All evidence is partial. Have any attorneys in the room? He's hiding. Is all evidence partial?
Perhaps.
I like that. That's with a capital H in the middle. So we can come back to this, and I hope that you will ask questions about it, but let's now go to forgiveness. And I like to say it this way. Some of you have heard me say, if you don't blame, you don't have to forgive anybody. Just don't blame. Stop it. And when I say stop it, you have to see the way you do it. I mean, even if somebody's obviously murdering somebody, we have to do something about that. But as far as blaming someone and saying they are in toto, they are the complete cause of that situation. This is a misunderstanding, and a misunderstanding that is rampant. It's called samsara, the wheel of life and death. There are no individuals anywhere, so there's no one that can do this to someone else. That being said, of course there is. Again, how can I say that? Two different ways, because it's not two. If you understand it, that it's not two, you'll stop separating everything, and you'll begin to be able to see deeply into who you are as an individual, a parent individual, and who other people are as a parent individuals. It's not about getting rid of your ego or anyone else's. It's just seeing that as flimsy. So forgiveness, I can't read my nose. Too far away. No, that's all right. I'd rather stumble. So forgiveness is something that sometimes we need to do. I'm not saying just like blame is something, well, you did that. You're the one who, you spilled that, clean it up. So we're not saying that that everybody has no longer ever blames anyone. We're not talking about that. We're saying just be aware of how that works, and that way you'll do some of that, but you won't turn it into some kind of a solid thing where you get to be right and the other person gets to be at fault. Or you get to be at fault, or you poor thing, you have this heavy weight on your shoulders of all the horrible things you've done. Did I roll my eyes to the Dharmakaya? I did. So forgiveness is something that quite often people promote. You just have to forgive. You just have to forgive them. And this is and I'm not saying you couldn't do some of that, but keep it to a minimum. And when I say that, I'm saying that if someone has done something that you've blamed them for, or they have been blamed for, just look at it. Because forgiving them might be more about you wanting to be a person who forgives others. So it might be more about your self-centeredness, wanting to polish it up a little bit, shine it, and say, they really harmed me, but I forgave them. They were really bad. They stole all my money, but now I just had to forgive them. So you basically did it for yourself, so you would feel better because you were sick of feeling like crap. But didn't really say, you could say, like it might appear, or we might want people to think, let them off the hook. And the other way that I like to talk about it is by forgiving someone for something they've obviously done or been involved in. Their hand did reach into your glove compartment and take your $100 bill, and they didn't even bother to fix the window they broke. But they did do something. But the causes and conditions that arise that that make any singular thing happen are innumerable. You can't count them. You can't see them all. You can't intercept them at the past so that this thing won't happen. But I can say this much: if one thing changes 1,500 feet, 200 or 300 years, 22 minutes away, then that thing that happened will not happen. It's like the example I often give: if you're you can apply this to yourself. If your exact mother and your exact father didn't get together at an exact minute, there would not be an exact you. Might be somebody, but they probably wouldn't be here. So the idea with blaming, that reinforces the fundamental illusion of mistaken identity or belief in separate selves. The blame that reinforces it, and forgiving someone also reinforces, as if you could actually, you're in some kind of position where you can forgive somebody. What is that saying? Oh, I know. Give me a break. That's it. You're not in a position to forgive someone else. Excuse me. Do I still have the microphone on? No. I sneezed it right off. Any questions?
What's the opposite of blame?
I think it has to do with I blame you or I blame myself, that kind of thing. Might come up with another kind of, everything has some kind of polarity and they tend to shift around.
So you mean like creating the opposite story?
Yeah, do it the other way. Or blame, no blame.
What does that sound like in your head?
Silence.
I can't do that.
Huh?
I can't
It's not something you do, it's something you don't do.
Create silence?
No,
Don't create silence?
don't blame. Blame fills up the silence. Don't blame. When I say don't blame, first you have to see the way in which you blame, because you can't reach in and find the concept of blame, and there's no little handles on that where you can pull that out of there. But if you see what the blame actually is, it has to get its energy from the three poisons: passion, aggression, and ignorance. And it can't get that because you're looking at it, your awareness is there, and it's not agreeing with that kind of polarity or that kind of tension.
Well, so I've got these stories and these thoughts going that are blaming,
Yes.
in my case myself, if I'm blaming,
Yeah.
how do I continue those, welcome
Yeah.
and include those thoughts and then
Very good.
not shut down?
Yeah, this is why this is why we have the sitting practice of meditation, shikantaza, just so that we can find the one thing, or the two things, or 8 things that we can fundamentally have a say-so about. You notice you can't find your mind, you can't find that part and go off, and or turn the volume down, or rearrange your thought patterns. But you do have some say-so about with your body, and your mind are not separate. They're separated in a sense, but they're fundamentally not separate. So if you sit down, hold still, the shikantaza practice, sitting, holding very still, and watch what moves, then that very dynamic you're talking about there will start to show up. And you'll see the way in which you fuel it by a belief in somebody who can blame, or a belief in somebody who can forgive. It's always about, we could talk about it off in the distance, like blame or forgiveness or all the other modalities that show up very similar to that by, giving someone lots of credit for something. If someone's born with a beautiful voice, they don't really get credit for that. It's like someone being born 7 feet tall, plays basketball. It isn't like, even though we do that, we admire people like that, but it's a really highly sophisticated form of narcissism. Not wrong, but it's very, very mundane. And if we were going to live forever, I'd be all for that. Let's just live forever, because after about 300 or maybe 400 years, everybody would be pretty sane, because they'd just be tired of being nuts. They'd be worn out. And people would eventually just cave and say, I'm just going to go along with stuff. I'm all done fighting. But since we don't live that long, just another way of talking about it, it seems to be necessary to acknowledge that this life is coming to an end, sooner or later, sometimes too soon. And so, mundane path is, you got forever to live, you can just work and get a degree and make a lot of money and retire in Mar-a-Lago or someplace like that. But awareness will tell you that this could end any time. And so therefore, as it has been said, practice like your hair is on fire. In other words, find a way to really sit down and clarify this basic mystery of what is a human being. What does it mean to be here? You notice I don't remember making any of this, making this person. As a child or growing up, I was completely baffled by the whole thing.
How could you respond to a person who is asking for help with forgiving someone?
You could talk to them about it, how the person's functioning. It would be very, very individual. So you could ask them how they're doing so far, and then have them explain to you by what they mean by help. Because you have to find out what they're really asking you for before you can offer anything. Because if you lock into the forgiveness part without really seeing what they're using the word forgiveness, but let's find out what they really mean. Are they just trying to are they blaming themselves in some way, and they're really trying to forgive them so they can stop feeling bad? So how is it actually structured? And then you could go even into the story about it. Why do you want to forgive them? You could even say, just don't blame them. Stop blaming them. They say, yeah, but lied to me, or they stole my girlfriend, or whatever the thing may be, and say, well, just stop blaming. And how do you do that? You have to see the way you blame. It's the blaming, the pointing the finger, is reinforcing that tendency to separate based on being a so-called separated human being who needs to eat and needs to have a job and all the other relative things that reinforce our apparent separation. More? Good question.
How is it that we're not in a position to forgive someone?
Well, as I think I was saying or meant to say, you can do that, but be very aware of what that means when you're doing that. If someone is saying, like, you know, the very simple way is you come around the corner, you bump into somebody, you say, oh, I'm sorry. You know, oh, that's okay, no problem. You know, it's kind of a simple thing, but then it gets escalated into more about you wanting to be a person to forgive. You're tired of feeling the blaming that you're doing, so you're doing it. Do you follow me a little bit? It gets very convoluted there.
I think so.
Yeah. So you can forgive someone. It's just bringing awareness to the forgiveness to see what is the fundamental intention or motivation under that. You might be better, when I say better, you know, it's kind of an evaluation, but it might be a better situation to not get, to look at the situation more thoroughly before you bother with doing anything. See what they did. See, you don't usually use personal examples too much, but I had a situation where we had a building that we were renting, and someone stopped paying us and basically left and took everything, took the furnace, two of them. So that's you know, it's kind of a hard thing. I sent them a text and say, that's not a good idea to do that, those were ours. But on the other hand, have to look at it and see, you don't know what, it's confusion that gets somebody in that kind of a situation where they want something and they go into that and they it just wasn't worth, say, calling the police and getting all wound up and all that kind of stuff. And don't misunderstand, I'm not saying everybody should be a pushover or something. But in that situation, it was like, I don't know what put them in that situation. I don't know what their life is like. So it wasn't like, I didn't particularly forgive them. And there was some blame going on, but there wasn't the kind of blame where, you know, I'm thinking about buying a gun or borrowing one. This is better. So, you know, a little bit, that's why it's, in Buddhism it's called a middle way, not too tight, not too loose. So a little bit of that seems to work okay because we are in a relative situation. We're human beings, we live here, we have to eat, sleep. So we have to have, a relative truth can't be blocked out altogether. We're this ideal angel kind of person who never complains about anyone, who starts to, light starts to come out of their ears. They're so holy because they wouldn't ever think a bad thought about anybody. But to have a little bit of a middle of the road kind of situation, not too tight, not too loose. So the next time you blame or the next time you feel like the need to forgive, just look, bring as much awareness, sit a lot, bring as much awareness to it as you can to see what is that about? How's that fundamentally operating for me? Rather than am I right or am I wrong, or did they really do it, or should I do this, should I do that? More? Yes?
So just the mechanics of this blaming. So during our practice, then would you suggest that we kind of conjure up that scenario that causes us to either blame ourselves or blame others to be able to look at it?
I would say you could do that. You could do that if you're doing a lot of sitting. The main thing is to stretch the awareness to a lot of shikantaza, a lot of sitting still, watching what moves, so that you can stretch, expand, strengthen the witnessing part of the consciousness, rather than the thinking, evaluating, judging, condemning, weighing, balancing, contrasting back and forth, this and that. So if you're doing a fair amount of that, then I would say you could spend a little bit of time contemplating that, which might be the way I often say, someone has a particular issue that is difficult or something they need to maybe look at on the cushion, and they could sit for 45 minutes or an hour, and then have maybe like an index card and have a couple of words on it to bring them into the conceptual area, and set that down and just sit for a while, and you could look at it and then maybe close your eyes and think about those concepts, see if you can see how those work, and then you'll know when to stop doing that and go back to just shikantaza or just awareness practice. Is that? Yeah, you've done some of that.
Yeah, and you've often said that we don't really have any control over our thoughts.
Not much.
So if, and I realize this is a hypothetical, but if that just comes up unbidden, so to speak, and is that the time to look at it then?
So I think less is better in that situation. If you're really being kind of haunted by that, then that's probably the time to do it. Whereas if it just comes up, then it kind of turns an angle, has a couple facets to it, but then peels off, then just keep sitting, watch what moves. But if it seems to have some gravitas to it, where it's really giving you a hard time, then probably doing the directing your mind right into contemplating that particular situation. Further questions? Jesse?
Maybe it's a practice you call it, that you talk about not picking up the vocal cords
Yes.
in your body, and your facial expressions.
No.
That would kind of fit with the direction of blaming outwards.
Yes.
What is something that would kind of follow suit for the other direction?
So do you mean really blaming somebody but not saying it? Or do you mean actually blaming somebody but then turning it all around and starting to blame yourself? Which one?
Yeah, when the blame is coming towards yourself.
When someone is blaming you or you're blaming you?
Oh, like when I blame myself.
Okay. So I feel that the most important thing to do when that is happening is to just watch it, just observe it. There might be a point where you would shut it down, or you would deliberately go in and just stop it or change your direction. I think that some people can actually do that. There's a slogan in the Tisha 7 Points of Mind Training that says, change your attitude and relax as it is. So it's just look at that, and it's almost like you have just a tail end of this thought, not the complete thought. It's like, well, this is ridiculous. You wouldn't say that, but you'd have that feeling before you said this is ridiculous, because if you wait till you say this is ridiculous, then you're trading one thing for another difficulty. But if you actually see it with your insight before words come up, then you could change your attitude and relax as it is. You change. You have had that happen a few times where it just changes, and it's almost like what's that? M-A-G magic. It's like that's because we felt that kind of clutching at our heart about some difficult feeling, and we saw it. We kind of saw the ridiculosity of it. That's a word. I just made it up. We see that that's ridiculous, but we don't. But even before the word comes up, as a filler to substantiate our insight. Anytime you substantiate insight, this is called concepts, and it's called more duality. You see it, change your attitude, relax. The attitude changes on its own, and you just relax in it. You realize you're kind of spaced out, and you don't feel too bad at all. Anybody hiding around there? No. Any hiders way in the back? Further questions about this would be helpful. There's a lot of ways to go down into this. Goes on.
So you said before, you don't need to forgive, just stop blaming.
Yeah.
And then we were talking earlier about the silence being full. So if it's just full of dialogue and words or maybe stories,
Mhm.
in order to stop blaming, do you have to recognize and blame?
I think you do.
So how would you, if it's just dialogue and you might not even know it is blame, but maybe it is, how would you see that?
Repetition, bringing awareness into it, bringing the awareness into it over and over and over again, without grasping, without rejecting, without shutting down. The three poisons, and that takes, that's why we call it practice. Someone comes in to begin practicing meditation, quite often the first thing you run into is how wild and crazy their mind is. You know, we didn't know it was so complicated.
So then
Sorry.
if you're looking at the dialogue of a story, should
Yeah.
you say practice saying oh blame and then
Practice what?
labeling blame? Calling it blame?
You might do that. And here again, it's like you can't. There isn't one kind of protocol that's going to work for everyone. It's like the awareness needs to be really strong, so that what arises in your particular makeup of causes and conditions, or confusion, or clarity, is treated with respect, so that you can actually understand this for yourself, rather than just you use somebody else's kind of idea or technique. This is quite often in the Zen tradition what the koan is about. It's actually, it's illogical logic. It pretends to be logic, but it's illogical. And therefore, when someone who is your teaching person, your teacher, he or she gives this to you, then it's like you have to work with it to transcend the issue that is being pointed at. Just a way of saying that sound one hand clapping. Three sheets to the wind, that's another one. Sorry.
How does that relate to blame?
Anytime you have blame, you're positing some situation that is true, and that's true, and they did it.
Terry DeParin over in Novi.
Terry sat with us all morning, left me a note, a voicemail, said he couldn't get over here, but he meditated all morning.
His question is there forgiveness without blame? For example, the forgiveness of the situation.
I think there could be. So, but what I'm suggesting here is not to stop blaming, not to stop forgiving. I'm saying put some awareness in there, and let's you could say, to take it into a more relative situation, let's bring some equanimity into this, some kind of natural balance that's already the case. Nobody's really to blame for anything. If you're the blame for something, then I would blame you for your low IQ. Why weren't you born smarter? Come on, get smart. Isn't that a movie? Get smart. So I see Jay has just entered the meditation hall. Welcome, Jay. And there's Robert coming into the meditation hall. Thank you for coming, gentlemen. So this is an area where I can emphasize again. It's not about changing some activity, other than bring awareness into it, and you'll see that for you in a particular situation, the whole blaming dynamic will take on its own tenor. It will take on its own, but it'll come out of your experience about your situation, along with the causes and conditions that arise as you. So we can't change yourself into some other being overnight. This is when my teacher, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, used to say, the shortest talk I ever heard him give, well, almost the shortest. Be genuine. So this means took a long time to realize that, what that meant, but it basically is saying be whatever you are, however your karma, however your emotions, whatever is happening, be genuine. Actually, be that, because if you're that, if you're trying to be something else, then you're missing your life. You're missing what the awareness, as far as this tradition, is supposed to be looking at, which is the causes and conditions that arises any given lifetime. So if you're who you are, then you might have to acknowledge that you have a lot of pride. You might have to acknowledge that you have a lot of confusion, or you might have a lot of sensitivity in a certain area about being criticized, or you might be any number of things. You might have a difficult temper. You might have jealousy that you'd like to get rid of. You like to pretend that you don't have it. Yes.
A while back you said somebody who had lived 300 or 400 years would get sick of their nutsness,
Might take 500 or 600.
and it might just drop. But so,
Just a way of talking about it. Yeah, go
so
ahead.
maybe if you live 82 years, maybe that nutsness would drop, but that would be more condensed. So how can we go through our nutsness in a short amount of time, or be strong enough? Because it sounds like it would be a big wallop.
Well, I think it depends on. I mean, anybody who's in this room right now has a kind of karma that brings you in here. So you're even. There are a lot of people that that are very, very intelligent people that could come into this room and listen to this for a little while and just think, this is terrible. I can't do this. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He's talking in circles. Yep. So people are not ready to hear it. It doesn't mean that it's some kind of elevated, highfalutin teaching that people are not getting. It just means that people are not ready for this way of working with your life, with their life. So a person who lived, say, just hypothetically, a long period of time, eventually might get kind of tired of going around in circles. Just they might eventually kind of see it just by being alive. Might eventually, at 168 years, suddenly enter adulthood. Since you.
How can you help, back to my first question
Yes.
of responding to someone who's asking for help with
Yes.
this, how can you help a person see the way that they blame if they don't have an awareness practice?
Might be challenging to do that. You could dialogue with them about it. It might be, someone that doesn't have an awareness practice, then they would be kind of locked into their thought patterns of trying to improve. So if you're a meditator and you've done this very long, this is not about improvement. That's the mundane path, and that's something you're certainly welcome to do, and there are a lot of people who will help you with that. But the spiritual path is about actually transcending the relative situation that we are so enamored with, the success and failure situation that we're so velcroed to. So you just have to work with the person where they're at, and you would be there by talking to you, just by being with them. Their whole thing is going to lighten up, because you wouldn't reinforce any of that by criticizing it or by fluffing it up or validating what they felt or thought. Yeah, you should do that. Yeah, that was terrible of them to do that to you. Although I need that kind of help when it comes to my furnaces being stolen. More? Good question. So do you see what I'm saying? And just if you meet people where they're at, anyone here, if you just be with someone where they're at, that's a tremendous amount of help. You want to call it that. They may not perceive you as being all that helpful. You may not think of yourself as being all that helpful, but there are levels to consciousness that are not necessarily happening in the frontal lobe. You have no idea. We're all sitting here. We're all so aware, right? You have no idea what's happening in your stomach. That's consciousness. And like I sometimes say, because I like to try to be funny. Ready? If you suddenly got in charge of all the consciousness in your body, you'd be dead in a few minutes because you wouldn't control things. You wouldn't control your body temperature. You wouldn't be able to control your heartbeat. All that is on automatic pilot, kind of. Not funny? Yes.
What's the
Jacob?
difference between being genuine like you were describing and not getting caught up in whatever thought patterns or emotions we're experiencing?
So it's very similar, because to not get caught up in something, you have to see what it is, you have to acknowledge what it is. So you might have really intense negative feelings, but because you're so aware of those and you're not blaming anybody for it, you're also not blaming yourself. You're just it's just there. You're just hearing the sound of a bird. You're just feeling the temperature of water. You're just there with that in terms of the consciousness operates in so many different ways when it is not being meddled with by the thinking process of, is it right, is it wrong, should I, shouldn't I, did they, what do they say about, what do they think about what I'm thinking, what do I think about what I'm thinking? The constant chatter of the so-called rational mind, just be present with that. And then the dynamic that's happening there, you're just that. This actually can manifest as humility. It might not be noticeable, but it can manifest as something where someone is not presumptuous about anything, including their own abilities or their own sense of being right or wrong. They're just present. And also pretty hard to challenge a person who has nothing to lose. You follow me a little bit? So just being present, just walking into a room full of people, and even though you have negative feelings, maybe some people you like more than others, this is always going to happen. Some people we're really drawn to, and other people we have difficulty with, even though they're not doing anything wrong. Nothing you could point out, but there's something about that, the frequency of that, or probably frequency is a good word, something about that is more difficult in other situations. And I say nothing with it. It's like, instead of saying, gee, I wonder why I feel like that around that person. That's extra. That is actually leaving the situation in favor of your thought patterns about it. You actually abandon the very life you're living in your sense fields of being present, being present, being present. There's nothing to do. Falling apart, falling apart, falling apart. It's falling apart the structure of the mind that we think is so real, that we're trying to win, we're trying to get ahead, we're trying not to die. And I'm not saying die, I'm saying it's kind of this is something that's natural to die. So we could just watch what happens in the mind without jumping on or jumping off. In this way, be genuine in the sense that negativity arises. It's not because of that. I mean, it might be. And if it's really difficult, then maybe we need to go find someone to help us with that. So I'm not saying there's some kind of special power that if you practice awareness, you'll never suffer again, or you'll always be, better than that. So, anything else? Bailey.
In that situation, it seems like there's a subtle difference between watching an emotion arise and being with it or being present in it, and then the extra thought of, I'm going to let myself feel that, or
Yes.
let myself do that. What is that subtle line or that subtle difference?
Yeah, I'm going to let myself feel that as extra. And it takes time. We have to eventually, because the beginning of that is, yes, we might have to do some of that, but as we go along, eventually there's no one in the background directing the stage play. There's no director, there's no actor, there's just acting, it's just functioning, there's no person behind it. And it takes a while. Sitting practice of meditation, actually, if you do it enough, and there's no guarantee, but if you do it enough, the possibility of that kind of revolution is stronger. In the Yogacara tradition, it's called a revolution at the basis of consciousness. in the eighth consciousness, where there's a turning around, where that totally empties out. It's not that it empties out, it's their way of saying it. I would rather say that you don't believe it. It's like stuff tumbling out of the attic. What attic? There's no attic in this building.
Does that being present with whatever is arising, that just occur then without somebody?
Yeah, you don't, awareness is not something you do, it's something you are. And if you begin now, stop objecting to your life. Any negative feeling in 3 hours from now that comes up in your life is your opportunity to just stop fighting with that. It's been said by many other people, just whatever rises is exactly what you need to see. Whatever happens to you is exactly what needs to occur. It just doesn't look like it to the self-centered mind, or the ego mind, or the narcissistic mind, or the seventh consciousness, which wants things to be a certain way. Doesn't like that, wants this. Wants more of this and less of that. And whatever that other thing is, we just don't want to look at it. That's the three poisons of passion, aggression, and ignorance. And I'm not saying you can't function fine in the world without meditating or without practicing this, but it's probably going to be difficult at some point without an awareness practice. Haley?
Can we, as a practice, is there something we can do with that extra thought of, I'm going to let myself feel this emotion?
No. Just see that, and don't do anything. Don't try to get rid of it. All you have to do is be aware of it, and then your own awareness will see the separation in there. We'll see that that's separating from the thing it's referring to. It takes a while. You have to actually stop trying to correct yourself. Stop trying to just don't do anything with it. Don't do anything unless you have to. And so this means there's a willingness to be with that second thought, second thought, second thought. You could say until it just doesn't show up anymore. It gets all of delusion gets its energy from being opposed or agreed with or shut down on. Those are the three ways that we do this. Do we do something else? What?
If that shutting down is in the form, you're sitting in meditation, and that form of shutting down is wiggling or going to take a drink or to the bathroom, how, and you kind of get a sense that there's a need to look at something, but you also see yourself checking out and doing something else.
So it's still awareness. And there's different ways of teaching it. Some, if you go to a monastery in ancient times, you wouldn't be able to leave here. You'd have to come in and sit down. You couldn't talk between sessions. There's all kinds of, even recent times, there's still places that you could go where you don't get to socialize the way we do. I think socializing is very important. So, but as far as getting up, it's your awareness practice. And if other people are sitting and you're puttering around with your coffee cup, or you're feeling like you've got to get up and leave, then I think it's, of course you should stay there if you can, but if you can't, I don't know what it's like to be you. I'm not so presumptuous about that I'm going to make everybody meditate in a certain way. I think just getting people to come in the room for 10 minutes and sit down and face the wall is quite a big deal. This is happening, it's so rare for this to happen. For us human beings to sit and do this without some kind of guarantee, some kind of promise that do this and this will happen. That doesn't happen here. If you come in and you sit, you're an adult. You don't need a bunch of strokes.
What about at home? A lot of people, it's harder to sit at home. The other people, even if you're wiggling a little bit, it's just there's a great support in having others.
There certainly is.
A lot of people start and stop and practice, and it's so hard at home. So how can you keep yourself on a cushion at home? Is there a way you're not with the
Stubbornness. Sangha, This is why they have the formula of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. The more you're around the Sangha, the more you're around other people who meditate, it seems to be help, support, because then you can sit together and reinforce it. Because to sit down and train the mind from the point of view of the ego mind is a ridiculous thing to do. You know, the more you do it, the more you feel like, this isn't working. Well, that's how the ego, or the self-centeredness, it's not going to work in favor of the self-centered. The self-centeredness is going to start getting threatened more and more and more the closer it gets to the part where there isn't any support for that. And it's seen to be a fiction. It's unreal. So we, as I've said hundreds of times, we don't have to get rid of ego. You just have to see it's not real. It doesn't want you to see that. The self-centeredness wants to cover that up and pretend to be unreal. So that's why sometimes in the tradition it says that all be grateful to everyone. This is again Tisha's 7 points of mind thing. Everyone has been your mother. It's just a way of saying that you're not separate from anyone. And be grateful to everyone means that even the person who's not mistreating you, some kind of understanding of whatever they're doing to you is bringing up your own passion, aggression, and ignorance. The part that you thought you had licked, you thought, well, I've got that. I'm very peaceful now. And then you meet somebody who it just knows right where to poke you in the rib cage of your ideas, possessions, ideology, or whatever it may be, and you start to get really mad or enraged or something. So you can be grateful to them for showing you where your anger is still hiding out in the dark corners. Any further questions before we close? And Orioki? Wonderful. Thank you so much.